Okay, I'm just gonna get set up really quickly. I'm sorry. All right, so this is my final project, Balling Around the World. I'm Mark Dixon, and I will first want to apologize if it's a little difficult to see anything that's on my screen right now. I was running into a few issues trying to upload this on YouTube, but like everything else we've run into this semester, I had a plan, ran into issues, found workarounds, and a way to ultimately get there. So this is really kind of on brand for how my semester's gone. So start off, top of the key. What's my question? Um, so my question was, has the NBA's increased involvement in trying to grow its global brand coincided with an increase in international representation? This question was really born of me just watching the NBA playoffs and realizing that the three finalists for MVP are all foreign-born players. And I know that the association's reach and attempts to really like up its global brand has been something that's been spoken about a lot, especially since I was younger. And to see so many players from other countries performing at this high level has really made me question, has the international representation changed overall? And how has it changed? So that's my ultimate question to try to answer, and these questions below are trying to quantify that a little bit more. So how has the international representation in the NBA changed since 2004? Um, but specifically, how many international players have been active this season, and how does that compare to the previous years? And how many countries have had representation in the NBA season compared to seasons past? So these are the questions that I'm looking to answer to try to really say, has the NBA seen increased involvement in international players? So, backpedaling a bit, I mentioned 2004. All of my references here are going to be from present day to that specific year, looking at the players that are playing today and the players that were playing then. The reason I picked this year wasn't just kind of offhand, it was because this was the year that the NBA went to 30 full teams. So the number of players in the league at any given time has been pretty stable since then, about 500 players. It's about 15 per team, but then there's a few that kind of float around and get added and subtracted throughout the year. But even further, the NBA founded NBA Cares in 2005. This is an organization that has really kind of taken over the NBA's charitable and international outreach programs. So while there is the reason that this is important is that there's kind of two real questions here. One's the moral part, um, and that's about the NBA having more representation just being a good thing in general because more people who are of different backgrounds are getting put on a high platform, able to speak about their issues and their specific situations. Um, but also because financially, NBA Cares has been operating since this time, and I imagine the NBA would really like to know, have we seen tangible results from this organization that we're pouring money into? And this also, 2005 also marks like a very big commitment that the NBA started to make towards increasing its global footprint. So let's see how it's changed since then. So drawing up the play. So this is my plan. First, I started out with the country shape file that we had from a previous Slack assignment, a list of NBA players from 2004, and a list of NBA players from 2022. I did pretty much the same operations on both of these. First, I did a group by country for each of the players by birth, then the number of players born in each country. So at that point, I had the number of players who were born in each country. I did an attribute join between the country name and the country of birth. So that way I was able to have essentially one sheet that had the country listed, the number of players in 2004 listed, and the number of players in 2022 listed. From there, I created a new field called International Shift, which is basically just the NBA's 2022 numbers minus the NBA's 2004 numbers to try to get a value that can really quantify how a country's representation has changed over this period of time. Um, So these numbers could be positive or negative. If the number was positive, that meant that its representation for this country has increased over this time. And if it's negative, that means it has decreased over this time. Um, and then lastly, I did symbology and used manual breaks to kind of have those graduated colors, so that way we can really see which countries have changed the most, both in the positive and negative direction. And finally, I had a map of countries with with their differences in representation. Again, this is between the years of 2022 and the year 2004. So while that plan sounded very clean and easy to do, it wasn't exactly a layup. There were a few issues that I ran into while trying to execute this plan. Ideally, I wanted to use nationality and not birthplace. However, when I used nationality, the names didn't quite exactly line up. Um, for instance, the country's name would be Germany and the nationality would be German. So when I tried to do the join, it wasn't exactly working out well. So I decided to go with birthplace instead. And for most people that were in the data set, it didn't really change, but there were a few that it kind of did change. So I would ideally like to use nationality instead, but this is what I had to work with. Also, I had a ran into an issue where some countries no longer exist. Because I'm using 2004 data, a number of the players were born in the 80s. So there were players that were born in East Germany and West Germany. And obviously mapping that to today's world, that doesn't really make sense anymore. So I had to go in and kind of manually update some of those and some of that information for countries that may have changed their names or may no longer exist the way they used to. And finally, scaling. That's going to be ultimately a problem that I feel like always comes up when you're trying to do mapping. Not everything is of the same size, and therefore it becomes kind of difficult to really pick the right CRS to demonstrate everything in. All right, so this beautiful map is my map. So here we have the differences in representation from 2002 to 2004. So three is a three-player or greater decrease. I'm sorry. Dark red is three-player or greater decrease. This lighter red is two, and kind of going up. And then as we get here, the dark blue is a greater than three-player increase. So this looks very similar to what we did previously for our election maps. That's intentional. I thought it was a pretty cool map, and I think it really kind of got a lot of information across very quickly. Um, Here you can see that some countries, specifically in Europe and Africa, have seen a number of countries increase in these continents. Uh, the number of players is very substantially increased. Whereas some larger countries such as Russia, China, and Brazil has seen their representation decrease. This is one of those times where the issue and size of the area becomes kind of an issue because the countries that the number of players and representation has decreased are huge. You can see that they're all gigantic countries. Um, but these smaller countries, there are a lot of countries here that have actually seen their representation increase substantially. I also want to say there's this issue here where the United States comes up as light blue. The reason that this comes up instead of like being completely gone is again going back to that whole nationality versus birthplace. I used birthplace, but there's some people who were born in the U.S. whose nationality is not American. So that kind of complicates things and made it so this shade kind of came up for the United States. And for countries where you see that they're actually in gray, like Mexico, that means that the number of players hasn't changed at all. The white means that there haven't been players in the NBA at all represented, but the gray is just there have been. It just hasn't changed since 2000 from the 2004 data to the 2022 data. And all this information that I was able to capture was all from Basketball Reference. Um, it really was kind of the go-to for any information about players or or anything like that, where they were born and stats and all of that stuff. So, I'm gonna get into balling around Africa. So because I mentioned before, the scaling was kind of an issue because so many of these countries were smaller. I wanted to really zoom in on a couple and two of these continents and specifically to show how they've changed. Here you can see the dark blue is means that they it's substantially increased, whereas these lighter blue countries here has seen a smaller increase. And you see this little basketball symbol I have here. This is the way I denoted any country that has gone from zero representation in 2004 to representation in 2022. So I really wanted to show the countries that have actually seen have are now being represented that weren't previously. And then this is the same for Europe. We can see there again. A ton of countries here um, that were again smaller, so they were really difficult to see on that larger map, especially compared to this gargantuan Russia over here. But there's a lot of countries that have seen representation that didn't even have representation in 2004. So this is really, for me at least, this is really cool to see. And players like Luka Doncic and um, Nikola Jokic, you can see like they are really kind of trailblazers for their countries because they really haven't, at least in 2004, there weren't any players from a lot of these Eastern European countries playing in the NBA. But now we're seeing that more and more there are these players that are coming from the Euro leagues and playing in the association. I just want to quickly mention though, France, three countries in particular: um, France, Canada, and let me think. I think the France, Canada, and Nigeria have all seen the greatest number of increases between their players. Canada, our neighbors to the north, have seen a 19-player increase, so that's more than a team's worth of players have been uh, are now in the NBA versus what was in the NBA in 2004. So that's a huge increase in representation. France has seen an 11-player shift, and Nigeria has seen a 9-player shift. And the only country to fit into that final category for decreasing players um, was Brazil. There are three fewer players now in playing in the NBA from Brazil, but there still are two players. So it's not like it's completely lost its representation. It's just significantly lower than what it was in 2004. But ultimately, I kind of got ahead of myself here. Looking at the answers, I just kind of had to use the pun. I couldn't help myself. The number of international players today versus the international players in 2004 has gone up from 143 to 89. I mean, from 89 to 143. This might not seem like that big of an increase, but it is significant considering there are only 500 players in the NBA. A 60 player swing is enormous, especially in terms of representation. The number of countries represented today is up to 50 versus the 31 in 2004. And here, underneath here, are the lists of every single country that is newly represented now that wasn't in 2004. So you can see that based on this quantitative data, it does seem that the NBA has seen an increase, definitive shift in its representation over the years. So that's my entire presentation. I'm gonna just kind of go back to here, just because I like the way the map looks. I think I did a pretty good job on it. Um, but I think for me, if I'm just going back, um, making sure I'm hitting all the points. So this being my first completely asynchronous course, I was pretty worried coming into this. But the direction that we've been given has been very clear, and outside of just general GIS mechanics, I've definitely learned to construct a narrative around the map and a visualization in general. making sure that I understand how to like impart a very simple and effective message without trying to overcrowd it with too many words. I had to starting to realize now that I need to really respect my audience and under and make sure that while I am prescriptive in what I'm trying to get across, that I don't oversaturate everything. Um, I don't know if I have a future in GIS. I definitely haven't really seriously considered it until this class. Um, but I know that the tools that I've gained in this class, just kind of working through problems and really brainstorming through them, are definitely something that I'm going to be using in the future. And then also, like I mentioned before, kind of making presentations and uh, kind of imparting information through a visualization is definitely going to be something that is useful and as I progress in my career. But I'm definitely not going to be ruling out a future in GIS. I've actually really enjoyed what I've learned so far this semester, and I think I'm kind of good at it. So I definitely will continue to use it to start to try to answer some bigger questions as I move forward. I'm hoping to have a serious career in like data science and data analytics, and I just feel like this visual component is kind of cool for really making it all makes sense because I feel like a lot of times when you just throw numbers at people, they don't exactly see what they really mean. But when you show a map to someone, I feel like anyone from any country can really interpret that information and use it um, in a very real and successful way. But I think that is it. I want to say thank you for a great semester. Never actually got to speak to you, but we're very cordial in messages and everything, and I appreciate you putting this all together. All right, I think that's it for me. Thanks. How do I stop this? How do I stop this? Stop it.